Hi, how are you? Welcome. It's weird to come on and know that I'm talking to a bunch more people. Welcome to the Catella Bubble. I want to give a big thank you to everybody that has been supporting my channel recently. I've started to get a lot more comments, a lot more feedback on my content recently, a lot more subscribers. I've just passed 1,500 subscribers. Yay! So I just have to say, big thank you. I'm really happy that my content is resonating with people. I'm glad that people are interested in hearing my thoughts, hearing what I have to say about this whole mess, because, oh boy, I've got opinions. Hey, welcome back. Hello. Welcome to the Catella Bubble. If this is your first time here, thank you for checking me out. As the title will suggest, today we're here to talk about Prince Harry and all of his legal cases. I've been wanting to dive into all of these legal cases ever since I kind of fell down this rabbit hole, watching Harry and Meghan, reading Spare, getting kind of exposed to the PR side of this whole royal family story, and the legal side has been one of the parts that has really piqued my interest in this whole, royal news BS kind of stuff. I'm in the middle of recording my final video for my Spare review / breakdown of the last half of part 3. So now the part that I'm in the process of filming right now is very much about all these legal sides of things. And it's also about Harry in the book coming to the realization that there was a lot of criminal wrongdoing that happened in relation to his life and how the press reported on it and how they were involved in his life. So it was interesting seeing him unpack that potential criminal wrongdoing and how that's manifested into today's legal hearings. What's meant to be great about the law is theoretically, legal matters are supposed to be based in fact and evidence, right? Cases are very fact heavy. It requires a lot of discussion of nuance and legal interpretations. It requires people to present a logical case in order to explain why evidence is relevant or sufficient. And it requires a lot of transparency, a lot of documents will come out, a lot of information will come out, that because it's coming out in a court of law, and this is the legal arguments that people are making, there is a bit of caution that has to be put into the legal case that doesn't necessarily have to be put into what is said to the media, because of the idea of you can't perjure yourself in a legal case. You can't lie under oath in a legal case, which means that you would think that there would be, with all these facts that you can pull from, that there would be some good takes out there in the media. But you would be wrong, my friend. Oh, hell no. See, because the law is such a complex and difficult area, the majority of people don't really understand what happens in a legal proceeding. Maybe they have some dramatized idea of what it is from television or movies, but most people don't seem to understand how the law actually works and how legal cases actually function. And in a media culture that enjoys
drama and takedowns and smackdowns and slams,
the nuance of legal cases don't play into that type of media landscape very well, which is why I noticed when I was starting to look for things to do for this episode, I could already tell there were not a lot of gossipy tabloids and stuff on this story, because it's hard to actually portray a legal case in a way that is so one-sided, because a legal case is so complex. So for the most part, it seems like a lot of times tabloids or talk shows and things like that seem to distance themselves from really talking about it that much. They seem to sometimes bring them up if they want to slam Harry and Meghan or denigrate their character in any way, but they don't ever seem to really actively deconstruct anything that Harry is putting forth in these legal cases at all. So actually, counterintuitively, the media itself seems to be very bad at presenting all of the factual pieces of the case And even when they try to, again, it's very difficult for a layperson to really understand what is going on. Like, I really struggled even to wrap my head around understanding, like, how many lawsuits there were. Who are they against? What are the different parties involved? Instead, the media takes the idea of the lawsuits, and instead of actually examining what different parties are alleging in the case, they instead focus on just the lawsuit itself, as Harry bringing a lawsuit in the first place is some sort of negative thing that he's done. Even just bringing about all of these lawsuits, it somehow is meant to make us think that Harry is bad or Harry is doing something bad for doing that, instead of actually seeing if he has a case. They're not actually interested in what the case is alleging. They're just trying to use the case itself against Harry and Meghan or other people involved. So instead of analyzing the facts of the case itself becomes like just this weird drama divorced from what the parties are actually saying in court. Like, I see anti-Harry sentiment that will claim that Harry is filing for X reason or Y reason, and it's all about just painting him as this like crazy diabolical supervillain. But you don't have to speculate on why Harry is filing these, right? If they just read what was coming from him and his team, they would see his reason is pretty clearly articulated. So I've wanted for a while now to like actually sit down, do a deep dive, actually understand for myself what's going on with these cases, see how they're going, where they're going, and what are the good and bad takes out of all of this. You know me. Where is the media reporting well, in my opinion? And where is all the spin? And are there pervasive narratives about the cases that are just flat out wrong? Big disclaimer, okay? Big disclaimer. I want to make extremely clear, I am not a lawyer. I'm not a legal expert. I'm not a legal scholar. I'm not an academic in the law in any way. I have no way of saying what is legally sound or what is legally true, especially in the UK, okay? So take all of my opinions with a grain of salt. I'm just trying to interpret this all to the best of my abilities as a layperson, reading things that are publicly available and trying to come to my own interpretation. I wish I could find more legal scholars and people like not in the media, like content creators and stuff, legal analysts writing about this that I could look at that is geared towards a layperson like me to help me understand it. I wish there was more content out there about this. And if you know of any, please send it to me, because I've been trying to find anything. Like, where's Legal Eagle when you need him, you know? Like, I know he's American, but where's like the British Legal Eagle to tell me what's going on? Before we jump into reading anything, here's my understanding of how many cases there actually are. There's two major themes of the cases that Harry has brought forth in the UK. The first theme I would call like phone hacking or illegal information gathering by the press. Harry is actually going after 3 different news organizations. So because these are 3 different organizations, these are 3 separate court cases, which I don't think I fully understood until I started reading about it. The first organization is Mirror Group Newspapers, which I've seen abbreviated to MGN. As you can guess from the name, is responsible for the Daily Mirror. He is also suing News Group Newspapers, which is also abbreviated to NGN, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, which publishes The Sun, and Associated Newspapers Limited, who owns the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. The second theme of these cases is Harry's concerns about security. So for these cases regarding security, I'm not really going to focus too much on these because it's a little bit confusing even for me, and most news organizations don't seem to really know how to cover it at all, and I don't really know how to interpret everything. But the gist is that, so in February 2020, when Harry and Meghan were in Canada and their security was removed by the royal family and they fled to America and all that jazz and Oprah and blah, 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 Harry challenged that decision to remove his security. And those decisions are run through a group called, I believe, RAVEC, which is the Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty and Public Figures, which is operated by the Home Office. And Harry was basically asking, like, why was Ravik allowed to make this decision and I wasn't like a part of this process? And basically Harry was claiming that that decision was unfair. But what Harry was also trying to do was to try to make a legal argument that he should be allowed to pay for police security if they're not going to offer it to him through Ravik, that he should be allowed to ask to pay for some of the Home Office's intelligence gathering while he's in the UK. So that's all you need to know for right now. We're going to be looking at some articles that just kind of orient ourselves in the information about these cases. I'm not claiming that all of this is 100% true or anything, but just something to ground ourselves in before we start looking at some other opinions. You know what? I'm going to make a coffee first. So I'm really just going to be starting with Prince Harry's Wikipedia page because I can't find like a good timeline anywhere else for when all of these different legal cases started being put forward and the timelines for all of them. Literally, his Wikipedia page was like the simplest way I could figure it out. But I promise you, I have actually like looked at the sources here and I'm going to be reading some articles, some of which are directly sourced from this Wikipedia page. So like, I'm not just taking this at face value, okay? Like I said, there are 3 different media companies that Prince Harry is going after. The first is Associated Newspapers. He's had a bunch of different legal issues with Associated Newspapers Limited, otherwise known as ANL. But the one that is most interesting to me is the one that goes back to the phone hacking scandal, which was launched in October 2022. This was brought as a group filing by Prince Harry, as well as Doreen Lawrence, Sir Elton John, David Furnish, Sadie Frost, and Elizabeth Hurley, who are alleging basically that the Associated Newspapers were using information that was illegally gathered in some of their reporting, and that Associated Newspapers was directly involved in that illegal information gathering. ANL basically wrote back that they thought it was all baseless, preposterous smears and that none of it was true. This is an article published around the same time, October 6, 2022, from the BBC entitled "Elton John and Prince Harry Sue Daily Mail Publisher Over, quote, Privacy Breach." As a note, Associated Newspapers Limited is responsible for publishing the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. Like I said, the newspaper group basically fought back and said, quote, "We utterly and unambiguously refute these preposterous smears, which appear to be nothing more than a pre-planned and orchestrated attempt to drag the Mail's titles into the phone hacking scandal concerning articles up to 30 years old. These unsubstantiated and highly defamatory claims, based on no credible evidence, appear to be simply a fishing expedition by claimants and their lawyers, some of whom have already pursued cases elsewhere." Note that there is nothing literally in this statement at all that actually addresses any of the allegations. It just says that it's all bullshit. It's a little bit of a hard pill to swallow for me, considering not only do I know, like, how the tabloids be sometimes, but also everything that we've read from various celebrity memoirs about their relations with the press. It's just inconceivable to me. Anyway, Prince Harry and Frost are both represented by the law firm Hamlins. With Hamlins, they allege that the activities that Associated Newspaper engaged with included, quote, "the hiring of private investigators to secretly place listening devices inside people's cars and homes, the commissioning of individuals to surreptitiously listen into and record people's lives, private telephone calls whilst they were taking place." I think that's not only in reference to phone hacking and getting voicemails, for example, but I think also relates to actually eavesdropping and recording phone conversations as well. Quote, "the payment of police officials with corrupt links to private investigators for inside sensitive information, the impersonation of individuals to obtain medical information from private hospitals, clinics, and treatment centers by deception, I think that one is going to be the most difficult for Associated Newspapers to fight back against, because how are they able to learn private medical information about some of these subjects without any deception? I think that's going to be an interesting part of the case. And quote, accessing of bank accounts, credit histories, and financial transactions through illicit means and manipulation. So it sounds like they're really alleging that a lot of the times the media was using a lot of like impersonation to gain access to records that they didn't have any legal grounds to access, like bank statements, bank information, medical information, things that police officials would know. So that would also potentially be police records. So there's sort of like the manipulation in order to gather intelligence angle. And there also seems to be a sign of like wiretapping, listening devices, trying to gather information by surreptitiously recording people. Like I said before, Elton John and his husband David Furnish are also part of this lawsuit. They are represented by a different law firm. Another woman in this case is Doreen Lawrence, who is the mother of Stephen Lawrence, the British black teenager who was murdered in a racist attack in 1993. In the years following his murder, the Daily Mail campaigned for his killers to be brought to justice. Just want to go on a little bit of a side tangent here with this story, because everybody wants to look at, Prince Harry and Elton John and all the big celebrities in this case. But I wanted to know more about Doreen Lawrence's opinion of this whole situation and what she is alleging. This is an article from The Guardian entitled, Doreen Lawrence Claims Daily Mail Hired Investigators to Hack Her Phone. The article starts, Doreen Lawrence has claimed the Daily Mail hired private investigators to hack her phone and obtain information on her murdered son, potentially disrupting the police investigation into the racially motivated killing. Lady Lawrence now believes she, quote, failed her murdered son by trusting the Daily Mail during the 1990s, claiming the news outlet only campaigned for justice on behalf of Stephen Lawrence in a cynical bid to sell more newspapers. Reading that is absolutely heartbreaking to me. This woman was literally just trying to get justice for her son who was murdered in a racially motivated killing. And because the case was high profile enough to attract media attention, it meant that the Daily Mail might have actively hindered the investigation into her son's murder because of their actions. Later on in the article, it says, the newspaper ran a long campaign to identify the racist killers of Stephen Lawrence, culminating in a front-page story accusing 5 individuals of murder, which, firstly, listen, even if you want to say that we should bring justice against the killers of Stephen Lawrence, blasting people's faces on the front page of a tabloid newspaper does absolutely no good in making sure that these people get justice, right? One, you don't ever want to jeopardize potentially putting an innocent person on the front page of a paper and accusing them of murder. That's not a great way to go about things. Two, even if you do have the guilty party, you don't want to jeopardize their actual trial by putting things in there that might actively help in their case, to say, look, we're being scapegoated by the media. The media is attacking us. You don't want to give the defense that kind of story to run with, that you blasted them on their front pages. The paper often held up the story as an example of newspapers' commitment to fighting for justice on behalf of those who lack a voice, recently calling its campaign a, quote, key moment in British race relations history, which is hilarious from the Daily Mail on multiple levels. Daily Mail, is this you? Harry's Girls straight out of Compton? Is this you? Daily Mail, you can't actively run racist stories and then claim to be the saviors of racism in Britain. Like, what? Yeah, sure, maybe the murder of Stephen Lawrence itself was, quote, a key moment in British race relations, but Daily Mail, you don't get to take any of the credit for that when you went right back to creating the same racist narratives that perpetuate racism to this day. Like, blowing smoke up their own arse, you know? Lawrence said she now believed the campaign on behalf of her son was a cynical way to sell newspapers by appearing to be on the side of a young man killed in a racist attack. In documents filed to court, her lawyers said Lawrence, quote, cannot think of any act or conduct lower than stealing and exploiting information from a mother who buried her son for this reason. She feels used and violated and like she has been taken for a fool. Rather than campaigning due to a genuine desire to get justice for Stephen, she, quote, now sees that the Daily Mail's true interests were about self-promotion and using her and her son's murder as a means to generate exclusive headlines, sell newspapers, and to profit. She wonders whether trusting the Daily Mail as she did caused her to have delayed or have failed her murdered son, the documents say. She asks herself whether more individuals could have been arrested, whether earlier investigations might have been more successful, and whether she could have got justice. The documents say Lawrence now, quote, feels a deep sense of betrayal. She finds it hard to believe the level of duplicity and manipulation that was clearly at play, knowing now as she does that the Daily Mail's outward support for her fight to bring Stephen's killers to justice was hollow and, worse, entirely false. Among other claims, she alleges the Daily Mail instructed private investigators to conduct a legal interception of her voicemail messages, tap her landline phone, blag personal records, monitor her bank accounts and phone bills, conduct covert electronic surveillance, and make corrupt payments to serving Metropolitan Police officers working on her son's murder investigations in return for confidential information. What's really sad about this is the media and associated newspapers, because they know that going after Doreen Lawrence would be a really bad look on them. Instead, they use this like faux paternalistic style voice to sort of be like, oh, I feel so bad that Doreen Lawrence got manipulated into launching this legal case against us. When it sounds like, from the statements we just read, she really feels like hurt and betrayed by the Daily Mail for doing all of these things right here, which the Daily Mail knew were illegal. They knew all of these things were illegal, and yet they worked with private investigators to do them anyway. She was personally affected by this, and she brought this case against them of her own volition. She wasn't tricked into it. She's not being used or manipulated by Harry. She's got a lot of things here that she has been personally the victim of. They just happen to sound a lot like what Elton John and Prince Harry have gone through as well, because it seems to be a pattern of all of these media organizations. They seem to be doing all of the same things. Back to the Wikipedia article. So after the Associated Newspapers case, so the other two news organizations that Harry has brought claims against, those cases started to be filed in October of 2019. So 2 years before the A&L one. At that time, Harry was going after Mirror Group newspapers, so MGN, and News Group newspapers, NGN. To reiterate, MGN owns the Daily Mirror, and NGN owns The Sun. And Harry also brought claims against News of the World, but News of the World doesn't exist anymore. But these are the cases that relate more to the phone hacking scandal specifically, and relate to the fact that these parties didn't apologize because of that secret agreement. Seems more to be related to the fact that after the phone hacking scandal, Prince Harry was looking to seek damages for the phone hacking scandal, but that there became this entangled secret agreement between the royal family where the media groups didn't hold up their end of the bargain. And then Harry had to pursue legal action because they were basically pushing him off. Basically tell him, go fuck yourself, we're not going to give you an apology. This is also related to the stories that, one, the Queen okayed for Harry to pursue these legal actions, only for Prince Charles to confront Harry to say that he should not take legal action going against what he had been told by the Queen. This was the case in which Prince William allegedly received a large sum of money in exchange for keeping quiet about this whole phone hacking apology thing. I'm not really going to get into the minutia of what happened in court today because I don't think I can take it. So I figured I would come in for the update by looking at Harry's full witness statement, all 55 pages of it as released. And I thought I would just highlight some of the important things that were in this statement to add on to the discussions that we're having. All right, let's look at the statement here. So just to be clear, what is this document? Okay, so this isn't like everything that Harry's lawyers are putting into like defense, right? This isn't everything from like discovery or whatever. This is just Harry's response, Harry's statements under oath, trying to detail the claims that he's bringing against Mirror News Group with these specific articles where he is alleging that illegal information gathering happened, and then he's sort of explaining from his perspective why he suspects that there was illegal information gathering, what his side of the situation is like, who did he tell about that information, did he disclose that to anybody, in order to block any of Mirror Group newspapers' claims that they got that information through legal means. Mirror News Group is going to make the claim most of the time that they acquired all of this information through legal channels, often by claiming that they got it through talking to a friend of Harry or talking to some associate of Harry. But Harry, from his side, goes through and says, well, here's who I actually talked to. And again, he's making this under oath, right? He's filing this in a legal filing. So he says, here's who I actually spoke to and who I actually talked to about this. So I guess you could claim that it came from these people, but probably not. And then going through and saying sort of, how did this impact him? How did this affect Harry in his life? Why did this bring harm? What is the damage that this has done in Harry's life? So just to summarize, so first Harry goes through, he explains who he is, what's going on. Then he explains his relationship to the tabloid press. Where did this relationship start? He essentially says, this relationship has been throughout my entire life because I was a member of the royal family. What I thought was interesting when he talks about his relationship to the press is that he writes, quote, in my experience as a member of the royal family, each of us gets cast into a specific role by the tabloid press. You start off as a blank canvas while they work out what kind of person you are and what kind of problems and temptations you might have. They then start to edge you towards playing the role or roles that suit them best, which sells as many newspapers as possible, especially if you are the spare to the heir, which is really interesting. This is, again, Harry describing his relationship in his own words. He doesn't have to substantiate that this was the mental state of everybody in the tabloid press. He's just saying that in his experience, this is what it felt like, which I think is really eye-opening, and that's what Spare is all about, pretty much. He also states, quote, I thought that if they are printing this rubbish about me and people were believing it, I may as well do the crime, so to speak. Which is exactly what I said in my first episode on Spare. If you tell a kid that they are the naughty kid, they will be the naughty kid. He also specifically insinuates that tabloids were specifically happier with him being single, and that they would be really interested in his relationships at first and then seemed to be sabotaging him from there on out. After the novelty sort of wore off, that it seemed like the press was actively harming their relationships, which I didn't even think about. I thought about the royal family potentially being involved in that, but I didn't realize that he felt that the press was involved in that as well. But then again, what's the difference, right? Like, the press and the royal family are so close and so simpatico that, I mean, it might as well be the same thing. I also liked this specific factoid that he put in this opener that says, quote, I was no more than 5% funded by the taxpayer while I was a working royal in the UK, yet it felt as though the tabloid press thought that they owned me absolutely, which is 100% spot on. I like that he actually quotes the specific percentage because Harry got 5% of taxpayer funds, that it meant that his life should be completely scrutinized and that he should have like no private life whatsoever is so crazy. Why don't you hold like politicians accountable? Hold the government accountable for other taxpayer spending. Where's your military budget going? Where's your welfare programs going? Like, why are we trying to hold like the royal family accountable for where their taxpayer money is going. How is that an excuse to like go through Harry's private medical records to figure out that he had mono, which literally happened? I'm about to talk about it. Does that make any sense when it sounds like the British taxpayer doesn't seem to give a shit about where 95% of the rest of the money is going? Like, I'm just saying, it seems to be unbalanced, and I'm glad that Harry is trying to like make that so clear. So then he goes on to talk about his associates. He has to sort of outline who are sort of the key players in the story, who would have been in contact with him that could have been intercepted by MGN. Then he summarizes his use of a mobile phone. He has to detail the history. When did he get a mobile phone? When would he have been using voicemail? Why was he using voicemail? Why was that important to him? What were some things that he noticed while he was using his phone that seemed suspicious? He kind of mentions that there were a few times growing up that he noticed that like he was hearing a voicemail that wasn't marked new but was new to him, or he noticed that he had a new voicemail and then the notification was like deleted and things like that. He said that he didn't pay any attention to that at the time. It wasn't until after the phone hacking scandal that he sort of put all the pieces together and thought, oh, somebody was accessing my phone. He then also gives an impact statement. Now, he also details the specific impacts of each specific article that he goes through in the middle of this. But in this section, he sort of details the general impact of these intrusions. The biggest one that he's said over and over again is that it caused a huge amount of paranoia for him. He's talked before about how him and William really started to distrust a lot of people within their inner circles because the only people that could have been privy to certain information were people that were really close to them. And so when those pieces of information would be found in tabloid stories, the brothers would suspect that those people who were really important to them were leaking to the press. He specifically mentions that he started to get suspicious of Tiggy and Tiggy's husband, who he said he was very close with. He mentions Tiggy in Spare. He was so paranoid that they were leaking things that he said that he cut off contact, I think, with her husband for a little bit of time because they were so worried about him leaking things. It also put a strain on his relationship with Marco, who is also mentioned in Spare. He used to be his private secretary when he was pretty young, I think when he was around like 12, 13, 14, and who Harry says in the book was like a massive mentor for him. But because Marco was the only one that was privy to a lot of information that was being put in these tabloids that seems to have been gathered illegally. And he said that him and his brother also cut Marco out for a little bit of time as well. He also details how this put a massive strain on his relationship, especially with Chelsea. He also notes again that after the phone hacking scandal came out, he kind of put the pieces together that tabloid journalists seemed to be blagging flight information from Chelsea's phone or from Harry's phone to determine when Chelsea was going to arrive in the UK so that they could have photographers ready to catch her or Harry at the airport. And he said at the time, he just thought it was so strange. Like, how would people know that she was going to be coming in? And then he put it together that, oh, they stole that information. Allegedly. There was also something that came up where they seem to have found like handwritten letters from Princess Diana to Michael Barrymore that seem to have been illegally obtained by Piers Morgan, allegedly, or at least while Piers Morgan was the editor at the Daily Mirror. And he seems to have corroborated this in his book when he wrote, quote, "The TV comic Barrymore had recently been treated in a clinic for booze and drug addiction, and I'd heard rumors that Diana had been secretly comforting him." Oh, Piers Morgan. So the next section is called Articles Under Complaint. So what Harry details here is that 25 articles were selected by each party for initial consideration into the case. So what Harry says is, I'm going to go through each of them point by point, describe what the article is about, my knowledge of like the information that is alleged in the article, and the impact that the article kind of had on me. And also, it's usually Harry being like, well, where could this information possibly have been obtained legally? Prince Harry's team's legal argument is going to be like essentially process of elimination. There's no way that they can say with 100% clarity this information was illegally obtained, because maybe that evidence just doesn't exist anymore. But Harry's legal team can make the case that by process of elimination, where could any of this information have come from? And what seems to be interesting about it is that although they don't pinpoint Mirror News Group necessarily as having for sure 100% getting this information illegally, they seem to open the door for basically like two possible interpretations in most articles' cases. They tend to make an argument like, here's what was alleged in the article. A lot of this is true. Now the question is, how could anybody have known this? And so then Harry will say, well, I told this person and I told this person. If he remembers potentially leaving a voicemail about it, he will mention that. If he remembers receiving a call or something about it, he will mention that. So he will detail who he believes in his inner circle would have known that. And kind of by process of elimination, unless you're going to come out here and say, my source was Prince William or Prince Charles, or somebody else in the family that is like deeply entwined in all of this, how could you have received this information through legal means? Which is an interesting strategy, because what MGN is going to have to do is they're either going to have to say, somehow Harry misremembered, actually we could have gotten it from this person, maybe he actually did tell this person, maybe he doesn't remember he told this person, he's lying about who he told, whatever. They'd have to make that argument, or they have to make the argument that, yes, Harry's family was ratting him out. And if they make that argument, that's going to be a pretty interesting court case, because that would basically be MGN biting the bullet and saying the royal family is full of a bunch of scumbags who literally like ratted out their son for fame. And I mean, that is an argument. That is a legal argument, but is it one that MGN would really have the balls to make? Here's an example of that sort of legal narrative. So the article that Harry's responding to is 3 a.m. Harry's time at the bar from the Mirror, 19th of September 2000, written by Jessica Callan, Eva Simpson, and Polly Graham. He states that this article was about a lunch date that he had with some of his friends for his 16th birthday, again, a minor. But he notes, quote, I don't know how anyone would have known I was at this particular pub at this particular time in order to be there taking photographs of me. Based on what I understood at the time of how public engagements worked and the security measures in place for me and my family, I always found these kinds of coincidences to be odd. I now understand that the bylined journalists and the 3 a.m. desk as a whole are well known in this litigation for being involved in phone hacking and other forms of unlawful information gathering. My solicitors have advised me that many 3 a.m. articles authored by Ms. Callan have previously been admitted by defendant to have been the product of UIG. How could they have known this information ahead of time without unlawful information gathering? There was never any publicity from the palace saying Harry is going to be at this pub. There was never an announcement. In fact, specifically how security works is to downplay where all the royal family members are going to go. So how did you get that information? And then Harry will be like, well, it sounds like you have already admitted that these people have been involved in unlawful information gathering in the past. So that would make a lot of sense. He also makes a note, quote, what strikes me about this article in particular is the comment that a week before I had insisted that one of my PPOs join me and a friend when we had lunch at Pizza Express. I'm unsure of how the defendant's journalists could have been aware of any private conversation between me and my PPO. But it is notable because it's another example of the defendant seeming to know where I was at a particular point in time. Another one that I thought was really sad, but is also a great demonstration of how this whole statement works, is Harry responds to an article that was entitled, Harry Sick with Kissing Disease, Mirror, 29th of March 2022, by Jane Kerr, Royal Reporter. So the report was that Harry had glandular fever, which Americans call mono, okay? Harry notes that this diagnosis was accurate, right? But then the question becomes, how did people know about it? That was his private medical information. A doctor provided that diagnosis for him. How did the press know about it? He says, quote, "I'm not sure how anyone outside of my immediate family knew this. I didn't tell anyone as I was ashamed of having contracted it. It's one of those infections that had a huge stigma attached to it when you're a teenager, which is exactly what the article itself is playing on. And the impact on me was huge." It's Harry saying, look, this information was true. So if this information is true as I know it to be true, and I know that I didn't tell anybody about this, again, this would be Harry as a teenager, right? It's not like Harry is going to all of his friends screaming, "I have mono, I have glandular fever." So Mirror Group can't make the argument that like one of Harry's friends or confidants or something gave them this information. It's like either you have to say, you got this from Prince William, you got this from Prince Charles, or you obtained it illegally, either from accessing my medical records or accessing some sort of phone conversation in which you learned that information, because otherwise, where else could it have possibly come from? Another really interesting one, Harry's responding to an article called, "Harry, I'm going to join Army." Sunday Mirror, the 5th of January, 2003, by Rupert Hammer? I don't know. He said this article published on page 9 of the Sunday Mirror and written by Rupert Hammer reveals details of private conversations I had with my father about my future, mainly that I didn't want to go to university and would rather join the army. There's a surprising amount of accurate detail in the article, which includes the series of heart-to-hearts I had with my father, that my father had wanted me to go to university as my brother had done, and his feelings about my academic performance to date with my impending A-level results, and my preference for joining the army over the Navy or RAF after taking a gap year. The option of joining the Welsh Guards was also something we discussed. He then said that he only reported these conversations back to Marco, and that he would have reported these conversations most likely over the phone or in voicemail messages because he was at Eton at the time. He says, quote, "What strikes me about this article is the sheer number of quotes allegedly coming from a senior aide, a royal source, friends of mine, and an associate of my father's. I certainly wasn't talking openly to my friends or the palace about this kind of thing. It would have been only a few people that I trusted the most." He notes that Rupert Hammer, or Hammer, however you said it, is well known in this litigation as having been a habitual commissioner of private investigators, including JJ Services, Jonathan Stafford, Searchline, Commercial and Legal Services, and TDI/ELI, and that at least articles bylined to him have previously been admitted by MGN to have been the product of UIG. Unlawful information gathering. My solicitor has informed me that despite the story identifying 5 different anonymous contributors, the defendant only paid one person, which in view makes it very suspicious. So they wrote this article in which they got a lot of details about a private conversation between Prince Harry and Prince Charles accurately. The author of this article has been known to rely on these private investigation services that have been caught using unlawful information gathering techniques. They seem to have only paid one person to source the information for this article, even though the article quotes multiple different sources. But Harry makes the note that he wasn't telling anybody else about this conversation other than Marco, who he might have told over the phone. So again, I think that the legal strategy here is very interesting in that it seems to be that MGN is backed into a corner where they either have to say, yes, we illegally obtained this information, either by hacking a voicemail to Marco or from Marco, or Prince Charles told us. And if Prince Charles told him, or if Prince Charles intentionally leaked that, then Prince Charles, aka King Charles, the fucking king of the United Kingdom, is a scumbag who literally leaked a private conversation that he had with his own son. Why? And he talks about the impact that had and why that's bad. So the reason why it would be bad in either of those cases, he specifically states, quote, "My brother and I even stopped talking to Marco for a long period of time because they were so concerned that it was the only possible explanation as to how these truthful things were ending up in the papers. It made him so paranoid." Harry's responding to an article entitled "Harry's Date with Gladiators Star, The People, 19th of April, 2009 by Katie Hind. He notes that Katie Hind has been a regular user of private investigators like Robert Palmer and Commercial and Legal Services, who have links to UIG, allegedly. I don't even know if it's alleged. I think they actually do have links, legally proven links. So it was considered an exclusive, and it had 2 photos of him and Caroline Flack together on a street in Fulham, London. He noted that he was really upset when this article originally came out because he realized at the time that there were 2 photographers that were waiting for them there, and they were hiding underneath cars at the time. I believe this is Tweedledum and Tweedledummer or whatever in Spare. He talks about these 2 specific paparazzi who he felt like were involved in a lot of sort of dangerous incidents with him growing up. He makes note that, quote, "Marco and I had exchanged voicemails about the night we had planned, and given the way I left, there's no way I could have been followed coming down from Lincolnshire. Only Marco, Caroline, and I knew of the plans. There was only a couple of other people invited, and I don't think they knew that Caroline would be joining us." He stated, quote, "Given the fact only the 3 of us knew the plan, I was highly suspicious and convinced someone had leaked the information to the press. I was angry. I hadn't told anybody. I obviously doubted Caroline, but I even came to distrust Marco. William and him stopped talking to Marco for a long time, assuming that he was the leaker." So after all of the articles, there is a section called "My Mirror Group Claim." What I think is really important is that this is where Harry really makes an effort to point out in his statement that he understands the concept of journalism. He understands that there is public interest in the royal family. It's important to hold people that are paid by the taxpayer accountable. What he's really focused on here is how far should this go? How much should this impact and harm people in the spotlight? He notes, quote, "The problem is that over the last 15 to 20 years, there are now incredibly powerful media companies who masquerade as journalists and who have quite literally hijacked journalistic privileges for their own personal gain and agenda. It's an unbelievably dangerous place. I believe it doesn't matter whether you're a public figure at this point. Whoever you are, if you are of interest to the press at that time, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, if you're in private or if you're in public, you are a target. You become a victim of their system. They claim to hold public figures to account, but refuse to hold themselves accountable. If they're supposedly policing society, who on earth is policing them? Quis custodians custodiantes?" You were paying attention in Latin? When even the government is scared of alienating them because position is power. It is incredibly worrying for the entire UK. And that's the point. That's the point. I especially like that he makes the note. It doesn't even matter if you are a celebrity. If you become the interest of that press, then you become the story. You become the person of interest, and they're saying there is no limit on how far they can go with you if you catch any media interest. And people fall into this media interest all the time. It's not like everybody that is reported on by the media is like actively seeking attention, right? When we talked about Doreen Lawrence, she did not ask to be part of that story. She was the victim of a tragic racist murder. And yet because she was at the heart of that story, she became a victim of these types of unlawful information gathering techniques, allegedly. Think about every other person that is a victim of a family member being murdered or abused in some way, and they become a public figure in that way, or they just become a meme on the internet, or they are like a small level content creator. Everybody could potentially be a victim of this, and if somebody with as much power and privilege as Prince Harry or Elton John can have their privacy invaded to this extent with no consequences, then what good is it for the rest of us? What other legal repercussions would come from anybody else having this happen to them? I also like this statement, quote, "This has become a huge problem of which I have a unique perspective and experience, perhaps having had a front row seat to it. Because they have showed no willingness to change, I feel that I need to make sure that this unlawful behavior is exposed, because obviously I don't want anybody else going through the same thing that I've been going through on a personal level. But also on a national level, at the moment, our country is judged globally by the state of our press and our government, both of which I believe are at rock bottom." Ouch. Rishi Sunak's government. Ouch. Democracy fails when your press fails to scrutinize and hold the government accountable, and instead choose to get into bed with them so they can ensure the status quo. I may not have a role within the institution, but as a member of the British royal family and as a soldier upholding important values, I feel there's a responsibility to expose this criminal activity in the name of public interest. The country and the British public deserve to know the depths of what was actually happening then and indeed now. We will be better off for it. And there you go, signed in his ink. There you go. All right, it's time for some more React content, okay? This is going to be painful. I've already seen like halfway through this video, and I'm gonna be screaming, okay? This video is entitled "Prince Harry Can't Win His War Against the Media, Royal Insight," from The Telegraph, from Camilla Tominey. Now, Camilla Tominey is an interesting figure within royal reporting. She is a true believer, and everything that she writes that I've read so far is just like ridiculous and completely missing the point. So I'm excited. Oh, okay, I'm not excited, but
there's only one loser there, and it's the journalists that have done things in an illegal way. That's phone hacking, and if Harry thinks he's got a claim for that and he wants to go all the way through the courts to win it, fair play to him. Having said that, you also have to ask yourself, even if he wins, does he also lose?
Pause. Okay, so already 19 seconds in. So the first part, I don't like Camilla Tominey's saying, if there are journalists that have done phone hacking, Harry has a right to take this all the way up to the courts. I mean, that's definitely all true, but I think that there's something a little bit sinister in how she phrases that, in that Harry is not alleging that some journalists partook in this. Some bad actors partook in illegal information gathering or unlawful information gathering. That's not his argument. His argument is that these media groups were actually creating a culture, creating a system in which they were systematically obtaining unlawfully gathered information for their stories. The reason why I think that this is super sinister is that this has been the argument that the media groups themselves have been making ever since the phone hacking scandal first kicked off. You know, it's like a lizard that like sheds its tail and then like grows a new one. They were trying to distance themselves from particular actors within the media group and say they were the ones doing the illegal stuff. They were the bad actors, but we as a company, we weren't the ones engaging in those unlawful practices, or we didn't condone them, or we didn't know about them. The argument that's being made in court now is that's probably bullshit. The media news groups as a whole should take accountability. She's just parroting what these media groups were saying in the first place. Also, the fact that she then flips it to say, well, he could do that, but if he does that, wouldn't he secretly be losing? It's like, no, if you win a legal case, you don't also lose. That's not how it works. She means like lose in spirit, but like, again, that's mind games. Like, I don't understand. My cat just brought in. Yeah, I can't play with you right now. I'm recording a video. I'm watching Camilla Tominey be an idiot.
Because in the course of these legal actions, he's had to reveal, again, quite a lot of personal information.
Harry was not against the idea of revealing personal information. He's against the idea of it being illegally obtained. Like, there is a massive difference between revealing a lot of personal information because you want to file a legal suit against somebody so that you can receive justice, and somebody reveals a lot of private information about you because they illegally hacked your phone. Like, those are two completely different things.
Perhaps the most interesting aspect of Prince Harry's war with the media is how that sits with Meghan's aspirations. Because we witnessed before the statement was issued about the...
Oh my God, that threw me for a loop. I'm just gonna say it. I don't know why we're talking about Meghan. Why are we talking about Meghan? What does Meghan have to do with any of this? Harry is filing a claim against these media corporations. What does Meghan have to do with any of that? Like, again, this idea that Meghan is like manipulating things behind the scenes like a supervillain, like she's secretly the big bad of all of this. Why are we bringing up Meghan?
Paparazzi chase that the Duchess of Sussex...
I'm not even going to talk about the paparazzi chase comment because I have a whole video about it, okay?
Sussex is trying to rebrand and relaunch, and she was at that women...
Pause. Okay. I can't even like play the video because there's so much craziness. I hate this idea. So Meghan is rebranding or relaunching herself. The evidence is not matching the claim. The claim is that Meghan is rebranding herself as if this version of Meghan is not like what we've seen before. But this version of Meghan seems to be exactly what we've seen before.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am tremendously honored to be UN Women's advocate for political participation and leadership. I am proud to be a woman and a feminist.
Like Meghan doing charity things and getting like feminism awards. Like, listen, like, I think this is kind of like BS feminism too, okay? Like, I get it, but like, this isn't any different than what Meghan was doing before she even met Harry. So for it to be called a rebrand is very obnoxious. It's only a rebrand if you've fallen into like the psycho conspiracies that Meghan is secretly Satan and she's trying to rebrand herself from evil to good, which is not happening. The second reason why this is so annoying is that Kate is constantly being referred to as rebranding herself. She's rebranded her royal image. She's now focused on like children's charities and motherhood or whatever the fuck. So when Kate rebrands herself and like literally rebrands herself, like the way that she has been marketed within the royal family has changed, and the press is pretty open about that rebranding, but then saying this about Meghan and saying that she's rebranding herself is meant to be like a negative. And also, what the fuck does this have to do with the lawsuits? I'm so confused.
In a Vision Awards because she is kind of re-entering the world stage, and she clearly has ambitions which are predicated on her being a very public figure. There's clearly a desire for fame there, as you would expect of a former actress.
Again, trying to like tie back all of these like crazy conspiracies that like Meghan is manipulating people behind the scenes to like her being an actress. I always think that it's so weird the way that royal reporters report the concept of being an actress. You would think when they say actress, they mean shapeshifter. Somehow that like she can convince every single person around her. She's this like super chameleon, can like get in. It's just crazy. Like, being an actress doesn't give you like superpowers to like manipulate and control people. It's not mesmerism. You know what I mean? They act like being a former actress gets you some sort of witch power in which you can convince like all the sheep around you that you're a normal, good person, but only the true conspiracy-brained people can see that you're actually bad. And it's like, that's not how that works.
How does that sit with what Prince Harry's doing? Because he's actually, it's ironic because he said this about him and his brother, he's actually on a very different path to his wife.
This is dangling a little bit of breadcrumbs to the conspiracy brain that believe that Harry and Meghan are like on the verge of divorce for some reason, or keep toying with this idea that they're going to get divorced. I don't know where this like weird, crazy rumor has started, but there's just no evidence actually to show any sort of tension between them other than the media claiming that there is tension in these very vague ways that make no sense. Camilla Tominey is insinuating that there's some sort of strain in Harry and Meghan's relationship, that they're on like two different paths. What is the evidence to show that? We have none, other than this like vagueness of like, they have different interests. This one's like this, and this one's like this. It's like, okay, yeah, they're different people. They are not literally joined at the hip. They do things separately from time to time, but how does that imply that they're on the brink of divorce? Just very bizarre. The royal media PR team right now coming up with some crazy things. It honestly makes me wonder, like, why are they so obsessed with this divorce angle?
Because he is at the centre now of 6 different legal actions against 3 different newspapers. He's also suing the Home Office on 2 counts. One because he was stripped of his taxpayer-funded security, and he disagreed with that decision after
Why do you think he would disagree with that decision, Camilla Tominey?
Mexit. And secondly, because the Home Office has said he can't have the same security and pay for it, that Metropolitan Police bodyguards carrying guns aren't for hire.
Harry did not pursue legal action in order to ask the Met to become bodyguards for hire. The argument that was being made was, if I cannot be provided security, which you're saying I can't be, right? You stripped my security of me. Then, like other events and other celebrities, can I not ask to pay for some of that information from the Met in the way that a lot of other security teams do, so that I can have the necessary intelligence to make proper security decisions with my team? That's a completely different scenario. The argument that he was like he wanted to like drop down some money to pay for the Met to like be his private security team makes no sense. That wasn't what he was asking for. In some situations, the Metropolitan Police and the UK government are the only parties that are privy to certain intelligence, because they are the ones that gathered it, because some of that intelligence might be related to Prince Harry and would help protect him. He needs to have access to that information while he is in the UK so that he can travel. So just bad argument. Just bad all around.
So he's at the centre of all of these different legal actions, and he said himself in his own words to Tom Bradby, ITV presenter, this is my life's work. He feels like he's a man on a mission to reform the press.
The way that Camilla Tominey can say things that actually sound pretty good and make them sound bad is crazy to me. Like, he says he's a man on a mission to reform the press. Literally sounds like the most milquetoast argument that he could be making, that there should be press reform. And she somehow made that sound like a bad thing. Only crazy people could think that, right? To twist it into a negative.
And you could say that that's all quite backward looking, because it's very much about trying to avenge the people he thinks were responsible for his mother's death.
Pause. Okay. Yes, you have to look backward in order to make a legal argument. The phrasing that, Harry is always looking at the past. He's always looking backward. He wants to avenge the people that were responsible. Yes. That's what happens when you are alleging criminal wrongdoing, is you have to go back to the past and collect all the evidence that happened in the past, and you have to present all of it and say, I believe there was criminal wrongdoing, to make it sound like Harry is like living in the past. It's like, no, he's literally saying something illegal happened. Like, what else is he supposed to do? Like, you're literally just saying, well, don't file it. or he should feel bad for filing it.
Death of Diana, Princess of Wales in 1997, he still blames the paparazzi and by association the media for that. And if you look at Spare, it's quite backward looking, reflecting on his...
It's literally a memoir. That's how a memoir works, is you look backward on your life and you reflect. You can't write a memoir that looks forward. I mean, you could at the end, you could be looking forward, but I don't know, why are we painting this as something sinister?
Life growing up and his life as a prince and his life as the so-called spare to the heir. And at the time we asked Archwell, their people, why Meghan wasn't involved in that promotional tour, it was very much, we got the message that, well, she's looking forward.
They're trying to make this claim that because Meghan was not with Harry 24/7 during the time where Harry was promoting his book, like, gee, I wonder why Meghan wasn't involved in promoting this book. Could it be that she didn't write it and her face isn't on the cover of it? Like, what does she have to do with promoting this book? So one, that's not evidence of any marital strife. And two, this idea of, well, Meghan is forward thinking and Harry is backward thinking. What the fuck does that mean? Like, we're talking in such broad language and such broad generalities, it could not possibly explain the intricacies of somebody's marriage. And I just have to say again, what the hell does this have to do with Prince Harry's lawsuit against Mirror Group newspapers? What does it have to do with any of that? Just tell me what's going on in the court.
I've done a story about this @Meghan name handle being reinvigorated on Instagram.
Oh no, Meghan got an Instagram. I don't know how that proves or disproves whether or not there was unlawful information gathering from the Mirror Group. Tell me, Camilla Tominey.
So that's all happening while he is caught up in all of these concurrent court cases. Those are two different priorities. And I think for Harry, I mean, he does see himself as this champion for a different media. And the people close to him say he absolutely believes that this is his life's work and that he is in a position to change things for the better.
Note, she is saying things that would, in any other situation, sound pretty good, and is somehow like couched this in this idea of Harry can't win. Harry is being manipulated by Meghan. When the sentences that she is literally saying as quotes from his friends sound like positive things. He believes that he's doing something important. He wants to change things for the better.
And while me and others as members of the press know that this is quite personal for him and therefore he isn't necessarily an objective arbiter in this whole debate.
He doesn't have to be an objective arbiter in this whole debate. That's literally how a legal case works. He has to present his legal case. The defendant has to present their legal case, and then it becomes an arbitration between those two sides. But he doesn't have to be objective in it whatsoever. It's weird to try to discredit him by saying, well, he can't be an objective arbiter. Yeah, that's why he's literally going to court. That's how court works.
For him, he feels like he is the champion of something bigger than all of us, and if he has to write and say damaging things about his relatives, then so be it.
Okay, wait. He didn't say, if I have to write and say damaging things about my relatives, so be it. That's not what he said. He's telling the truth about things that happened so that the truth is out there. Maybe that damages certain people's reputation because the truth of the matter looks bad on those people, but he didn't say, oh, I'm gonna write damaging things, so be it. He just said he just wants to tell the truth about what happened, uncover the truth.
Because this is the bigger prize, reform of the media. My argument as a journalist will be, well...
I can't take Camilla Tominey seriously when she starts with, my argument as a journalist, okay?
My argument as a journalist will be, well, are you really in a position to reform the media when you've got a vested interest in maintaining your own popularity?
What do you even mean by that, okay? Are you really in a position to reform the media when you have a vested interest in maintaining popularity. Those two things are non sequiturs from each other, right? You can reform the media while also wanting to be popular. I don't even think that they want to be popular. They obviously like are happy to like do media appearances, go to engagements and things, do charity work. I wouldn't necessarily say that they want to quote unquote be popular, but that's a non sequitur, right? If Harry wants to reform the media by saying this is how the media has harmed me in the past, and he says the media did illegal things, right? then that would be media reform for the better, even if he would also like to like publish books. Like, these things have nothing to do with each other. Like, it's literally just not an argument.
You've got a vested interest in needing all of the headlines to be positive.
Harry's legal case is not wah wah, these headlines were too mean. His argument is, wah wah, they literally hacked my phone, stole information that could only be acquired through illegal means. The information that was put into these stories, how did it get in there? I want to know. Or if you want to make the argument that my father or my brother or whoever was your source, then come out with that. Like, say who are the people that ratted me out. It's not about how negative or positive the stories were. They had a negative impact because Harry didn't know who was leaking certain information. He didn't know who to trust. So even when the information was accurate, it was like, how did people know that? How did they obtain that information? That's the question. It's not about how mean the articles were.
There a noble aim at the heart of what Prince Harry's trying to do? Yes, because I don't think most people, myself included, are happy with the idea of paparazzi pursuing celebrities in cars and on motorbikes. Of course there's a role for them.
I think the video literally just broke. What happened? Hang on. With the idea, I think they literally fucked up the sound mixing.
Pursuing celebrities in cars and on motorbikes.
Yeah, I think they literally just messed up the sound mixing, but she was trying to say nobody would be happy with the idea of paparazzi chasing people in cars or on motorbikes. Then literally why were you downplaying that incident like just 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago? If you don't want that to happen, why were you so dismissive when it did happen? Oh, we do believe that these things are really serious and that's really bad, but don't do anything about it. Don't complain about it. Don't say anything negative about it. Don't make any legal cases against these people. Don't do literally anything about it. But yeah, we don't want that to happen. Okay, so what are the consequences when it does happen?
Of course there's a role for that. Do we want people in hot pursuit of anybody? No, we don't, because it's not safe. Have you seen any...
I also want to point out the sneaky editing on that, where they talked about a hot pursuit and then they showed images of this like really fast car chase, which was not what Harry and Meghan's statement was with the car chase in New York City, right? I can't get into that again, but like, it's just so sneaky. Like, they're trying to again present that they said there was a super fast car chase and that never happened.
Pursuit of anybody? No, we don't, because it's not safe. Have you seen any illicit photography of royals? You know, long lens shots of Prince George in a sandpit, long lens shots of William and Kate on their holidays? No.
That's... what? That's a bad... okay. That's not an argument. Okay. I don't even know why we're even getting into this argument about telephoto lenses, because the court case has nothing to do with telephoto lenses. I mean, that's shitty paparazzi behavior. Harry has complained about it in the past, but that's not a legal complaint in this legal case, right? This case is about unlawful information gathering. Using telephoto lenses is shitty. I don't think it's illegal. It's just shitty behavior. Even if the case was about telephoto lenses, which it's not, how does the argument Have you ever seen photos taken with telephoto lenses of Prince William or Kate Middleton or their children? Have you ever seen it? Well, if you haven't seen it, it's never happened. Just because you've never seen a picture with a telephoto lens of Prince George doesn't mean that no royal family member has ever had a picture taken with a telephoto lens. You're putting the burden on proof on what? Like us, the viewer, to know whether these photos exist? But it's not, it doesn't follow along. And what does this have to do with the case?
Harry is not alone in railing against the paps. But this is the other irony about this quest, and maybe it's about trying to change the behaviour of the paparazzi in the US. It kind of has to be. In the UK, there isn't that market. That is why when the couple recorded their Netflix documentary, they had to use footage from a...
Whoa. Okay, back up. Okay. So firstly, she used the word ironic, and I was trying to figure out what she was trying to say was ironic, and there wasn't anything. She just used the word ironic randomly. But she said, it's ironic that this must be about changing the behavior of the U.S. paparazzi, which it cannot be because this was filed in the U.K., so I don't know what she's talking about. But she said there isn't a market in the U.K. There is definitely a market for Mirror News Group. Wait, there is definitely a market for Mirror Group newspapers to publish stories about Prince Harry. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, do we have to go on the Daily Mirror right now and look up Harry and Meghan Markle? Like, there's still a market here. Like, what are you talking about? The UK media has no market for stories about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Give me a fucking break. You couldn't even get, like, 1 minute into this video without mentioning Meghan Markle for SEO purposes. What are you talking about? And then you said that must be true that there's no interest in the UK market for Harry and Meghan because in the Netflix documentary, they used a fake photo. And by a fake photo, I think they mean stock footage. And using stock footage in a documentary is not fake. Like, and what does this have to do with... I cannot follow the logic here. Because there was stock footage in the Harry and Meghan documentary, that is proof that there is no market niche for stories about Harry and Meghan in the UK tabloid press, which I could instantly disprove by going on literally any British tabloid's website right now. And because there is no market for stories about Harry and Meghan in the UK, that must mean that this lawsuit is meant to send a signal to the US paparazzi press. How? Why would he file a case against 3 different British tabloids and no American tabloids if he was really trying to stick it to the American tabloids? A lawyer would strongly advise against that dumbass take, okay?
Netflix says, well, we used some poetic license because it wasn't meant to be literal. But the implication was that they were chased around by paps wherever they went in the UK.
That is the implication, and that's true. And just because they didn't use footage of that doesn't mean it didn't happen. In a visual medium like a documentary, you can use stock footage to show something happening, and that thing could have actually happened as well. Like when they do the reenactments of murders in true crime documentaries, just because the footage that they showed wasn't literally when that person got murdered, doesn't mean the murder didn't happen. Spinning around in circles, making arguments about things that are not even related to this trial. See, this is why it's so hard to do any sort of research into these lawsuits, because anytime you look around for any sort of legal opinion on the case, you get Camilla Tominey talking her arse off about bullshit that has literally nothing to do with the Mirror Group case. It's just like Meghan is manipulative and horrible, and they lied in the Netflix documentary, and they're gonna get divorced, and blah, blah, blah. It literally is not legal analysis whatsoever. It's just crazy psycho conspiracy brain shit.
I think there is a sense to which Harry has paired up with some different celebrity friends to try and crack down on this kind of photography. We know, obviously, that he invited George and Amal Clooney to his wedding. George Clooney's...
Okay, that really frustrated me. Okay, so they make a reference to Elton John. So Elton John was involved in the ANL case. And then she like whiplashes to talking about George and Amal Clooney, who are not involved in any of these cases whatsoever. It's just like, ooh, they had George Clooney at their wedding. It's like, okay, like you were about to even talk about somebody that is involved in one of these cases, but they just like, they just walked totally away from that one. Oh, another thing, it's also really annoying because again, they're so focused on the idea about the photos. This case is not even about photos. It's not about paparazzi. It's about unlawful information gathering. How did you know that I was going to be at this location? How did you learn about this private conversation that I was between this person and this person? How did you know that information? It has nothing to do with photography. It has nothing to do with paparazzi. They're annoyed at paparazzi. They believe that paparazzi behave in unethical ways. They've made complaints about paparazzi, but the MGN case has nothing to do with photography. It has to do with how did they obtain the information that they obtained.
Any responsible, right-minded journalist thinks that phone hacking was a total aberration. It's like the most awful thing that the industry was responsible for, which still haunts journalists like me to this day, even though I thought the practice was abhorrent when I found out about it and had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, all of these journalists again are trying to like point the fingers and say, oh, I was so shocked that there was phone hacking going on. It's like, okay, listen, you might have not hacked the phone, but like it seems like these news organizations as a whole have a responsibility to make sure that they are not obtaining information in an illegal manner, and they are failing to do that responsibility, and therefore they should be held to account. If there is a pattern of behavior at a company in which there is a culture in which multiple people can get away with illegal activity, it is the company's responsibility to prove that they were not creating that culture.
I would have the same emotion about Martin Bashir's nefarious tactics to obtain that Diana interview. I mean, literally, he was forging documents and convincing her that people were leaking against her when they weren't. So the Mirror Group, for instance, has already admitted to a degree of accessing his information illegally, and they...
Wow, the one time we're actually talking about the Mirror Group, Camilla Tominey admits that the Mirror Group has admitted that there was illegal accessing of information. Crazy that they only put that in the video at 6:51 out of an 8.5-minute video. And the one thing that we actually relates to the case that we're talking about actually looks pretty bad on the Mirror News Group, because it's the one thing where they actually admitted to doing the illegal thing, right?
They have said that he should be paid compensation. We also know that Prince William has received, we think, around £1 million from News Group newspapers, who are the publishers of The Sun on Sunday, and the now defunct News of the World, for illegally obtaining his information.
Note that that is yet another case, right? That's not even the Mirror Group news case that we're talking about now. That's the NGN case, right? Rupert Murdoch's. It's interesting that she even brought up this fact in the first place. It's almost like she's saying that Harry should have taken the hush money. Like, oh, well, we know that Prince William took the hush money. Like, why can't you? I don't know. It's a weird choice in the argument.
Fair enough. It doesn't make a difference whether you go to court or you settle out of court. The newspaper group loses if they've...
No, wait, no. There is a huge difference between winning a court case and settling out of court. That's totally different. To say that either way the newspaper group loses out on it, it's like that just literally goes against the entire concept of the legal system, right? Like, if you settle out of court, you're avoiding the legal system. They're giving you money in order to save out on the potential of losing more money through an actual legal battle. If you win a legal battle, that newspaper group doesn't just lose, they get their ass handed to them because they actually have to admit responsibility. It's just bad legal advice.
Having said that, you also have to ask yourself, even if he wins, does he also lose?
I like how she immediately contradicted herself, because she said the only losers in this situation are the journalists who phone hacked. They're the real losers in all of this. And then she immediately goes, but is Harry also the loser in all of this? It's so weird.
In one of the witness statements, he's talked about how he felt shut out of conversations about phone hacking at the palace because William and others regarded him as a hothead. Again, we get this.
I don't actually know if he's making that argument at all. I think that was a gross misrepresentation of what his argument was. He was shut out of conversations about phone hacking at the palace because they had a secret agreement that he wasn't privy to. That looks bad on the palace, right? That shouldn't look bad on Harry. She spun it to claim that, oh, they didn't let him in on their little secret agreement with the press because, oh, you know Harry, he's such a hothead. So Harry and William, according to Harry and Spare, right, wanted to pursue more action against the newspapers after the phone hacking scandal came out. And the palace kind of politely discouraged them from doing anything about it. But they still always held on to this idea of getting a formal apology for phone hacking. And they struck a deal that apology was going to come at a certain point. But the press decided that they didn't actually want to hold that end of the bargain of providing the apology, because they knew that if they provided the apology, they would have to admit fault to more newspapers, and they didn't want to do that because they knew they could get sued. So the newspapers basically said, fuck that. We're not going to give you an apology. Harry asked the Queen, hey, can we start pursuing legal action because they are breaking their end of the bargain in this secret palace agreement, right? He got the authority to do that, and then Prince Charles, now king, basically came to him and said, no, I don't want you to do that because I have a special relationship with the press. So all of that, like, to claim that he was left out of all of that because he was a hothead, they couldn't trust him with any of the information about the secret agreement, that doesn't seem to be what happened. It sounded like the palace was willing to go through with this to a certain extent, but there was some sort of clash in between how far they wanted to go with getting that apology. But they seemed to agree at the beginning that they should be issued a formal apology for phone hacking. So it's just so messy. Like, I don't like the presentation of this.
A situation where he feels he's fighting for a higher prize and it's worth all of these repeated revelations about his nearest and dearest, but it's highly unlikely that his nearest and dearest agree with that approach because they obviously still follow this late Queen mantra of never complain, never explain.
In the statements, a lot of the legal narrative that's being strung there is either you obtained this information illegally or your source is somebody deeply intertwined in the inner workings of my family. And if it's the latter half, then never complain, never explain is some bullshit, because they are not publicly complaining and explaining, but they are more than happy to brief and leak and plant complaints and explanations in articles to manipulate the press.
He thinks that these revelations are for the greater good, but I can't imagine that his royal relatives agree with that.
That's okay. They don't have to agree with that. It sounds like William was paid £1 million specifically not to agree with that decision. All right, we're done. We're done with this. I can't even. I just thought I would kill a few more brain cells by watching this interview with Piers Morgan at the BBC. The video is called Piers Morgan, quote, "I've never hacked a phone. I've never told anyone to hack a phone," end quote.
Good to see you. Very good.
Better known now for being a judge on talent shows or walking off set on breakfast TV, Piers Morgan was for many years a campaigning and influential tabloid newspaper editor. Those years are back in the spotlight this week as Prince Harry and other claimants bring allegations of phone hacking to the High Court. Have you ever hacked a phone?
No.
Did phone hacking ever take place during your editorship of The Mirror?
Not that I'm aware of.
Already. Sneaky Weasley. What a Weasley little liar, dude.
It's always you think black people.
What a fucking liar, dude. What a fucking Weasley little liar, dude. What a fucking Weasley little liar, dude. Holy shit, dude.
Excuse me.
Holy
Sorry.
fucking
I'm out of
shit,
control. I
dude.
apologize for that.
Literally lying. Still lying to his audience. Can someone at least fucking enlighten Destiny that he's literally lying to his audience? What a fucking piece of shit.
Mirror Group Newspapers has already admitted that there was illegal information gathering. So for you to say not that I'm aware of, I mean, it's either a lie or you are incompetent at your job.
Because what you're not saying there is there was no phone hacking at The Mirror.
No, to be clear, originally I said I've never hacked a phone. I've never told anyone to hack a phone. And no story's ever been published in The Mirror in my time from hacking of a phone. And then somebody pointed out, well, you can only know the first two things for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. You can only know the first two things for sure, but we can also know that the third one is just not true, right? It's just factually inaccurate. I guess it's not a lie in that maybe you thought it was true when you said that statement, but it's not a great start when the only thing that you can for sure say is that you yourself did not hack a phone and that you didn't specifically direct somebody to hack a phone. But if you hire a private investigator and you don't vet that private investigator is not hacking people's phones, that's still on ya. You know, it's still on you, right? It's a very low bar to say, yes, you didn't literally pick up the phone and hack into it. Like, good for you. But, like, if illegal activity is happening under your watch, I mean, then you're pretty incompetent at your job.
Let's just state some facts for some people that don't know the detail and haven't been over this. There have been dozens of civil hacking cases against the Mirror Group, and we know at least 5 who have been awarded damages for phone hacking by the Mirror during the period when you were editor. That's Gaza, Sadie Frost, Shane Ritchie, Luke Taggart, and the TV producer Robert Ashworth. Now,
so yeah, you didn't do it, okay? You didn't literally pull up a phone and hack into it? But then you have to answer to us, so how did that happen? How was it that those articles slipped past you with that kind of information in it?
Those are the ones we know about because they came out in court, but most cases so far against Mirror Group newspapers have been settled. So we
When you say Mirror Group newspapers,
or Trinity, yes.
I only work for the Daily Mirror.
Sure.
No, but
Good for you. Okay, you worked at one paper in the Mirror Group News, but that newspaper is still responsible for what it prints, okay? Yeah, no, we cannot put the blame, you're right, we can't put the blame on everything that Mirror Group newspapers did on Piers Morgan. You're right, but we can put everything that happened at the Daily Mirror, in which he should have been overseeing it in an editing capacity, we can put all of that blame on Piers Morgan.
15, the Trinity Mirror Group apologised for historic phone hacking and said such behaviour represented an unwarranted and unacceptable intrusion into people's lives. You must see. I hear what you're saying.
well, I
about
agree
the
with that, by the way.
Sure.
I think phone hacking is completely wrong and shouldn't have been happening, and it was lazy journalists being lazy.
But there's evidence that it happened while you were editor.
There's no...
Exactly. Like, so yes, you can tell us, oh, I think phone hacking is wrong. I think it's bad. Okay, but that doesn't shirk you of all responsibility. You can tell me that something is bad or horrible till the cows come home, but if it happened under your watch, you have to explain, how did it happen under your watch? If it genuinely just slipped past you, be honest with that. I can't believe that this slipped past me. I need to take accountability for the fact that this slipped past me and make sure that this never happens again. Okay, take responsibility for that. But you can't just be like, oh yeah, it's really bad. It happened under my watch. I'm not going to do anything to like fix that.
No evidence I knew anything about any of it. I never told anybody.
That's a weird way of phrasing it. There is no evidence I knew anything about that. It's a very suspicious way of saying that you didn't know something. Like, if you don't know something, usually you would say, oh, I had no idea about that, or I wasn't aware of that. It's pretty suspicious to say, not on the stand, there is no evidence I knew about this. That's a very weird statement to make apropos of nothing.
To hack a phone. And nobody on the Daily Mirror, of the hundreds and hundreds, thousands possibly of journalists who work with me on the Daily Mirror, have ever even been arrested in connection with phone hacking. So there are lots of civil things going on, but as you know, the bar for that is a lot lower than it is for any criminal action. Yes, we can keep going over and over and over this, but the police, were pretty thorough in their investigation.
Pause. Okay, so that's another thing. Like, I don't want to get into the phone hacking investigations that took place at the time because I did not have time to, do a deep dive into all of that. But what I do know is I would say the investigation was not necessarily as thorough as it could have been, and that it sounds like a lot of people got out of that scot-free, allegedly, and that there was nothing legislatively that changed after that investigation. So Piers Morgan is basically like, trust me, bro, I had nothing to do with it because that investigation was so good. Well, clearly based on the fact that there's 3 lawsuits worth of other claims that can be made by Harry and other claimants related to phone hacking. So one, that kind of disproves the whole idea that that first investigation was super thorough. But 2, if nothing came of it, legislatively, if no changes were made, can we say it was super thorough?
I have not been involved in any of these settlements at all.
But
nobody has even asked me for my opinion, which I think says it all.
I can't even make a joke about that. Just Piers Morgan going on the BBC and saying, nobody has even asked me for my opinion, which I think says it all. Says it all.
But does it stretch credulity for an editor as intricately involved in the paper as you were to say this stuff was going on, but I didn't know about it?
I didn't. So I don't care whether it stretches people's credibility or not. But I can be certain about what I knew and what I did, and no one has ever produced anything to contradict what I'm saying.
Okay, again, that's just a weird way of saying that you didn't know something. So he's like, I didn't know. Okay, that at least sounded like something a normal human would say. But then he says, nobody has ever produced anything to contradict what I'm saying. What could they possibly produce that would contradict the sentence, I didn't know? We can't read Piers Morgan's thoughts, right? There's no evidence that can be produced to contradict the statement, Piers Morgan didn't know that illegal phone hacking was going on. But the question still remains, why did Piers Morgan not know about it? How can we hold him accountable for not knowing about it, when that was his job? That's the question. We don't have to produce evidence to disprove the statement Piers Morgan didn't know that phone hacking was taking place. He's arguing something that nobody cares about. I want to know, how are you doing better? But I mean, Piers Morgan doesn't do better. He is just perpetually bad.
Prince Harry, he's taking legal action against several tabloid newspaper groups. His legal actions include legal actions which concern claims about your record at the Mirror. Are you worried?
No, not at all.
Most people, Piers, would find that quite
I couldn't
concerning.
give a monkey's cuss. The idea
You couldn't give a monkey's cuss about the fact that
why don't you walk around and ask 100 members of the public?
I also want to say I'm so irritated with this BBC interviewer. I don't remember his name. That's such a bad question. Okay, firstly, are you worried? That's a close-ended question. That's a yes or no question. Bad journalism. Ask an open-ended question. Don't ask, are you worried? Ask, how do you feel? 2, Piers Morgan shouldn't be asked if he's worried. He should be asked, do you feel any sort of responsibility for this happening under your watch while you were an editor at this paper? I know that he's tried to ask that question a few times, but the fact that he just doesn't nail Piers Morgan on this point is just so frustrating. And now Piers Morgan gets to just talk about public spin and how the public feels and blah, blah, blah. It just detracts from the actual issue.
You couldn't give a monkey's cuss about the fact that
why don't you walk around and ask 100 members of the public, do you have any sympathy for Prince Harry when it comes to privacy now?
I talked about this the last time. I hate the spin that asks, well, what about what all the public thinks now that they've it consumed all this media spin. Ask 100 people what they think. That's not how it works. I don't care how many people have sympathy for Prince Harry. With the facts as presented in the lawsuit, Piers Morgan, how do you respond? You were responsible. You were the editor, and this slipped by you. How do you repent for this? How do you say, I fucked up. I didn't do my job. This is how I'm gonna do it better in the future.
Zero. This guy, he's got no time for his family. He comes all the way 5,000 miles, this eco-warrior, to come and lecture the media once again about...
Oh, God, no, we went off the deep end. Okay, so this became like a full-on, like, okay, conspiracy shit. Okay, he's got no time for his family. He lives with his family? What do you mean he's got no time for his family? Like, you can take a little bit of time out of your life to do things away from your family, like go to court. Harry cannot do anything outside of the house without Piers Morgan saying he's got no time for his family, just like extreme hyperbole. He says he comes 5,000 miles, this eco-warrior. It's so bizarre because I don't even think that like Harry's ever like presented himself as this like massive eco-warrior. It's actually kind of bizarre because Prince William is the one that has kind of fashioned himself as the eco-warrior of the royal family with the Earthshot Prize in terms of the young royals. And Prince Charles has kind of fashioned himself an eco-warrior because of all of his like environmentalism and like protecting endangered species and stuff. Prince Harry is the one that has kind of like focused the least on climate change and the earth and stuff like that. I'm not saying that's good or bad or whatever, but it's a really bizarre claim when King Charles and Prince William constantly get praised for like being super woke on like climate change or whatever. It's just bizarre. And to come and lecture the media, like he's not lecturing the media, he's presenting his case. The media is presenting their case. Like that's how it works.
Invasion of privacy and intrusion. And yet he is the biggest invader of privacy in royal history.
That literally doesn't make sense. You cannot invade your own privacy. You cannot invade your privacy. If something happens to you and you know about it, you have the right to talk about things that happen in private to you, like, or that you are involved in. There's no, he never invaded anyone's privacy. To make this like weird comparison, Harry can't lecture the media about illegally obtaining information because he maybe revealed some family secrets. Like, that's his right. Like, he literally has the right to talk about things that happened in his own life. But hacking a phone is an invasion of privacy. So, oh God, the backflips, it's just astounding.
So no, I'm not going to take any lectures from him, and I don't give a damn what actions he wants to take. Good luck to you. But honestly, it's like being lectured on the truth by Donald Trump.
To compare Prince Harry to Donald Trump when you are Piers Morgan is astounding. Like, I have no words for it. Oh, thank God this is done. Okay, I don't know where I'm gonna file this under. The first one is from Good Morning Britain. I've seen like the first couple of minutes of it already. I think that there's a solid case for good reporting and bad reporting for it, but I'm gonna decide at the end, okay? I don't know what to expect.
Prince Harry is about to get his day in court as his phone hacking trial against the publisher of the Daily Mirror begins.
Yes, the Duke of Sussex's case will be outlined today, and then tomorrow he himself faces cross-examination. This will make him the first British royal to appear in the witness box in 130 years.
Yeah, that's another good point. So this came out before Harry had given any testimony in court. Keep that in mind. This is the type of game that these people were talking before he even stepped into the witness box.
So, Will it be the start of a successful run of battles with the British tabloids for Prince Harry?
Joining us now to discuss our royal biographers, Angela Levin and Tom Bauer.
Angela Levin is an interesting choice. Angela Levin is a royal correspondent, expert, whatever, who has written a biography on Camilla, as in Queen Camilla. I think that they're pretty close. Yeah, just scrolling through everything that she's written for the Daily Telegraph. Yeah, Angela Levin, interesting choice. This Tom Bauer figure, I didn't really find very much about him with a little bit of Google foo, but I wasn't looking that hard. He also seems to be floating around in that kind of royal expert sort of space. So I take it they're both going to be playing defense now for the royal family pretty hard.
Angela, this is quite a decision, isn't it, for Prince Harry? We've been talking about phone hacking now for a decade or more. There have been very prominent people who've fought the fight in public, you know, from the royal world, Paul Burrell or Noel Fielding, Steve Coogan. But of course, there's been hundreds and hundreds of people who knew they were caught up in this, who knew their phone was hacked, but decided not to lead the public charge. And Prince Harry has decided to absolutely put himself in the frame and lead this fight, and he's going to be in court today. Is this a wise decision for him, or should he have left it to others?
There's something very odd about the way that Good Morning Britain's reporters act in this interview. So what he opened with actually seemed like a really interesting framing of the conversation, where he says, Prince Harry, out of all these celebrities, seems to be the one that's willing to lead this charge against the media groups that we know have done these illegal things against all of these various celebrities. And he's been the one that's really been able to take charge of it. And it sounds like an almost very positive way of representing Harry in this situation. But then the question that he asked to Angela Levin is, do you think this was wise of Harry to pursue legal action against the media groups? Which almost frames it as if he's saying, well, all of those other celebrities could keep quiet about phone hacking, but Harry is the one that's doing this. Like, is it unwise for him to take this on when he could have just, like, shut up like all of these other people? Which is a very negative way to spin it. So it's very interesting that he opens with a very positive portrayal of Harry, and then the question is one that could be taken as a pretty negative question. And Angela Levin is going to run with that negativity, of course.
I think it's completely unwise. I think when he says that this is going to be his life's work, it's even worse, because I think it's tragic. I think it's also arrogant. So
it's very weird that Angela Levin would say that it's tragic that Harry wants to have his life work be reform of the press, which is a pretty popular idea anyway. I think most people like the idea of reforming our media and making sure our media is like not spreading misinformation or not harming us in any way. I think that's a pretty popular conversation to be had right now. So it's weird that she would think it's tragic that he wants to devote his life work to that. Also, this idea that it's arrogant. What's arrogant about it? I don't think that he's saying, I'm the only person that could solve this problem. He says that he wants to commit his life to solving this problem. That's not the same thing as saying, I think I'm the only person that could do this. He's never really said that. In fact, in most of the cases that he's filed, he's not the only claimant. The media is focusing on him because he's the most high profile, and that's what gets all the clicks on their articles.
Terrible mixture together. He won't be able to answer all the questions and the attacks he's going to get from these top lawyers.
Funny to see that in hindsight, because we know that he was able to answer these questions no problem. Seems like he was able to carry himself in court pretty well.
He's had nice, soft interviews with people who don't want to upset him in case he walks out or tells them to go. So he hasn't got the experience.
Okay, yeah, Harry does not have the experience of being a witness. Most people have never been in a legal case as a witness, so most people don't have that experience. So I'll give you that. He doesn't have the experience of being in a witness stand. However, it is very bizarre because we do know that, like, Prince Harry has had, like, media training in his life, so it's a bit weird that she was like, he's not gonna be able to, like, handle it, even though, like, he spent his whole life being in interviews. Like, he has so much public speaking experience that it's very bizarre that she would think that he would crumble at this specific experience. It's also a weird framing as well. Like, Harry's never been asked a hard question in his life. Like, it's just so infantilizing. We have no evidence that he was gonna, like, storm out of this or walk off in a huff because he's just never had to deal with anything hard in his life. Literally, this war veteran, he's just gonna crumble under the pressure of being asked a difficult question in court. We've never seen Harry, like, walk out of an interview or anything, like, or storm off. Like, it's so hilarious because of all the people that we know that have, like, stormed off in this whole drama. Like, it's Piers Morgan, obviously.
Extremely negative. His whole life now seems to be negative, going right back into the past. His mother's death is going to...
Okay, well, before we get into Diana, what do you mean, like, it's negative? Harry is not being extremely negative. He's talking about negative experiences that he's had. He's saying negative things have happened to him, but he's not, quote unquote, being extremely negative. This is such, like, victim blaming behavior, right? Talking about a negative experience is not being negative. He's saying that something bad happened to him. He's explaining why it impacted him in a negative way, but that's not being negative. He's hoping to, like, open up and share his experiences and be vulnerable about negative things that have happened to him. It's weird coming from Angela Levin here, saying that, like, he's being too negative.
His mother's death is going to blame them for that, not taking into account that she didn't have a safety belt on or that the driver was drunk. You know,
I don't know enough details to talk about, like, Princess Diana's death. I can't say whether these two things that she brought up are true or not. Even if they were true, though, I think most people that knew Diana personally, like her brother and her children, all had an understanding of, like, the kind of stresses that she was going through with the press, and understood that the paparazzi contributed to that whole incident, even if these two things were true. So to make it sound like he's wrong for focusing on that part of it, when... Are you saying, like, the paparazzi didn't contribute to her death? Like, that's actually an extreme take to make. Most of the people that knew what she was going through knew that that was true, like that she was being hounded by the paparazzi. So it's not making sense.
It's just one way of thinking. Also about Chelsea Davy, his girlfriend before her. He said they ruined that relationship. I mean, that's 13 years ago.
But if they broke the law and hacked his phone, he's not wrong to be angry or upset about that. The question is, should he be public about it?
This is why I find it hard to figure out where Good Morning Britain fits into all this. So on the right, we have, like, the royal reporter, royal correspondent, royal expert, media spin, which is literally just to, like, denigrate Harry's character and say that he's, like, a horrible, manipulative, negative, terrible person, completely paint him as, like, a crazy supervillain. But on the left, we have Good Morning Britain's reporters are, like, really good at actually, like, pointing out, like, the reality of the situation. Like, if something illegal happened, then they have a right to complain about something illegal happening to them, right? So, like, he's living in reality, but then there's still that media spin, and it's more so, like, the mainstream media spin, where it starts to be, like, just slight victim blaming of, like, but does he have a right to go public with it? Should he go public with it? Really, is it wise for him? And that's more insidious and more nefarious way to, like, sort of be anti-Harry, but at the very least he's like living in reality and not like trying to like create this whole story of drama and tension that just doesn't exist, right?
Oh, that he shouldn't be public about it. He can get as angry as he likes, but it's not going to help him, particularly if he has mental health issues. He needs to be kind to himself. He needs to be positive. He needs to look to the future. He's got a wife he still absolutely adores. He's got
Angela Levin giving unsolicited medical advice to Prince Harry. Who are you, Angela Levin, to say whether this is helpful or harmful to Harry on his mental health journey? Like, who are you? How can you decide what is best for another grown man? He has the total right to take whatever he wants to court. To sort of infantilize him and say, well, I'm just telling you what you should do that's best for your mental health. It's like, but you're not in a position to say that to anybody or claim that you know better than them about what's going to make them happy and healthy.
Got 2 children, a beautiful home with 16 bathrooms and a swimming pool and a tennis court and all that. It won't ever wipe it out, but it'll enable him to feel positive and have confidence in himself, instead of which he's just a moaning, groaning individual.
Again, just this idea of like he's moaning and groaning when he's like pursuing legal action against these media corporations for spying on him. Yeah, absolute trash victim blaming. But also like this idea of like, you're a prince, you have no problems, you're so privileged, you're so wealthy, you have 16 bathrooms, what do you have to complain about? Whether or not he has 16 bathrooms doesn't make the Mirror Group News actions in gathering information, it doesn't make that legal or illegal. That's for the courts to decide. Like, whether or not he's privileged doesn't negate that wrongdoing could have been done to him.
Tom, I'm not sure that having 16 bathrooms lessens his grievance if he feels that he has been hard done by. I mean, we know that Prince Harry does not like, put it mildly, the way that he is treated by the British press.
Well,
I get really frustrated with the Good Morning Britain presenters. So she made a really good point here. Whether or not Harry is privileged, it does not make whether it was illegal or not. It doesn't change any of that. If he feels badly about phone hacking, he has a right to feel badly about phone hacking. The question that she throws to the other royal correspondent is a sneaky sort of question because it has 2 sort of interpretations to it. Prince Harry doesn't like the way that he's being treated by the press could mean Prince Harry doesn't like how he's being treated, as in how they've gathered intelligence on him, how they got information from him. He doesn't like how he was treated in that way. But the problem is, it also has another interpretation of Prince Harry doesn't like the way that he's being reported on, that he thinks like the stories are too negative or the headlines are too negative or too mean. That's another way that it could be interpreted, and I have a feeling that that's where this guy is gonna go with that interpretation. Why does the Good Morning Britain presenter not make that a little bit more clear in her questioning?
he's the victim of his own misfortune. He's the one who caused the problem in the first place. But what I find really puzzling...
Why did he cause the problem?
Well, because he was loved when he was married. He was loved by the public. He had huge approval ratings. And he trashed the brand by lying.
This goes back way before
it does,
his marriage to Meghan. I mean, it's actually got nothing to do with Meghan.
Exactly. Well,
has it?
It has.
Oh, God. I want to know what he means by saying that this has something to do with Meghan, because the presenter is right. It has literally nothing to do with Meghan. Oh, man. So much conspiracy fodder, like, in the few seconds that guy spoke. One, stating that Harry and Meghan like caused the rift, which doesn't make any sense. Like, go back and watch my video on Spare Part 3. 2, this case is about years in which he did not know Meghan at all. So this case has nothing to do with Meghan, because in all of the articles that he's talking about in this case, they came out before he had even met Meghan. So I don't know why we're bringing up Meghan. And like 3, this idea of like they were loved by the public and then they like trashed the brand by lying to the public. But the negative press happened before and after their wedding. So that's a little bit of a weird timeline. Like, think about the actual timeline of negative stories about Harry and Meghan. Like, she was trashed before they got married and after, and they didn't do anything different. They didn't lie or anything. So that's just like a total rewriting of history.
It has. She's geared him up to it. But let's move to a much more
what's your evidence that she's
well,
geared
because
him up to it?
Let's go back to the basics on this. Where has the evidence come out in the last 5 weeks in court that Harry was hacked? Because
Oh, that was a pivot. You should work for a ballet company with that pivot. He basically admitted he has literally zero evidence to make that argument that Meghan like set him up for this and like forced him to like do all these lawsuits. Again, it's just so infantilizing to Harry. He is a grown man. But the pivot to asking where is the evidence in court that Harry has been hacked, just comical after like everything we talked about, right? The Mirror Group has already admitted wrongdoing in multiple instances. They've already admitted to phone hacking in multiple instances. So it's just weird. Like there was a whole scandal about this.
I haven't read it. I know the Mirror has been a lot of hacking, but they deny that they ever hacked Harry. And he hasn't produced the evidence. And I think that is what's critical over the next 3 days.
Well, that's the...
No. The burden of proof is on Mirror Group. The burden of proof is not on Harry. Harry has given statements saying, I told this person, and this person this information. So your informant has to be either this person, this person, or another option is I told somebody about it on the phone and you stole that voicemail. Like, the burden of proof is on Mirror Group to show that they obtained that information in a legal way, through legal means.
Purpose of the court
exactly.
case, of course.
And what Harry is doing is, he is actually putting himself up to be, if he's unlucky, destroyed, because the Mirror will be absolutely entitled to test his credibility. And he has never gone through that process before.
And that this idea that like Harry's credibility has never been tested is just so bizarre. Like, at every turn, all the media is saying he's a liar, he's lying, like as if he's like never faced scrutiny. He's literally faced so much scrutiny for stuff that's like not even his fault. He's just denigrated constantly. It's so weird for them to turn around and say, but he's never been truly scrutinized. He'd never been truly had his feet put to the fire. It's like you're literally writing hundreds and hundreds of negative stories about him like every week for SEO.
That's what the court process will do. What do you think the family think of this, the royal family? What do you think, because you've been a biographer of his father, of course, what do you think King Charles makes of this? Is this something where they think, okay, Harry's got reasons to be upset perhaps, or to pursue this perhaps, or do they feel more than that? Do they think this is unwise and he shouldn't do it?
It's a weird way of her phrasing the question, because it feeds into the royal family's PR. It feeds into Prince Charles's narrative, don't read it, darling boy, it's unwise to attack the press. That's already, we've heard that from the royal family before, and she gave him a question that kind of feeds right into that. So it's also, again, it just shows like even the mainstream media, when they are like trying to be fair and they are really pushing back against the conspiracy brain stuff, they are still parroting conservative talking points.
I'm sure they think it's absolutely unwise and mad because he can't win from it. He's got 6 cases running, and he's on a mission to change the media. And the old saying, don't complain, don't explain, stands in this case, absolutely, because he hasn't got the evidence.
One, I don't know why he's saying he hasn't got any evidence. It's a court case, like he is going to present evidence. You can't just dismiss the concept that there's like any evidence whatsoever. Like, that's what the court is for. And like, never complain, never explain. It's boring. It's been done too many times now. Like, well, we already know it's not true. The royal family leaks and plants and sends out these people on the media every single day to parrot their talking points. They all make the same jokes. They all say the same things.
And undoubtedly, they were briefing about him, the palace, during his days with William as a young man and when he got into his drugs trouble and all the rest of it. But that's all in the past. That's happened.
Whoa, okay. He is like speaking from the royal family's perspective, and he's literally saying, yes, undoubtedly, his family just leaked against him in his youth. That looks pretty bad on the royal family. Like, I don't know if they would really condone that message. Thanks for being honest. That's all in the past now? Like, we're supposed to move on from that. That's finally the first time somebody, like a royal correspondent, has just been like, yeah, you know what? The royal family did brief against Harry. They did just like throw him under the bus. By the way, this guy has like the worst case of like British teeth I've ever seen, like in the bottom.
It has nothing to do with hacking.
And
That's what's so interesting.
I'm not sure.
Tom, when you say you can't win, I mean, in the outset of these proceedings, Mirror Group newspapers, in their opening, in the court papers they submitted, they did say that Harry and 2 or 3 other claimants in the case were due compensation because of unlawfully gathered information.
But
I mean, you could say...
They admitted to it. That's the crazy part as well. Like when he's saying they have no evidence, Mirror Group News is saying, well, they have evidence that it happened at least once. Now they're trying to downplay how much it actually happened, hoping to like just throw a little money at these people to get them to go away. But they are saying that hacking did happen.
And that's the problem for him. I think he's become the tool of this hacked-off group led by Hugh Grant and others and the lawyer Sherborne, and he has walked into a lion's den without realising the great dangers he's put himself in.
The spin is just dizzying. Is Harry being manipulated by Meghan? Or is Harry being manipulated by Hugh Grant? Who's the big bad in all of this, right? It's so interesting how at the top of the hour, we started with this whole Harry is leading the charge against phone hacking. Harry's like taking his stand against all of this, as opposed to all of these other people. And now Hugh Grant is secretly the big bad that is keep putting all of these people together, and Harry naively and innocently walked into all of this. Make it make sense. Like,
Angela, you said you think that he's moaning and whining and whinging and being negative. I'm not sure. Just set this aside for a moment, this particular case. I'm not sure why people are still so negative about Prince Harry. I mean, he has had a tough upbringing. He lost his mum. He believes, as many people do, that if she hadn't been pursued by paparazzi that night, that accident would not have happened.
Well, wow, she's like, I want to come back to your Diana comments. I mean, fair play. I think it's a good part to bring into the debate, but I wish you would stay on that whole like Prince Harry angle. Why are you guys so obsessed with all these negative stories about Harry and Meghan?
He's got real reasons to be aggrieved because of the treatment of his wife. You may agree with some of the claims that they make. You may disagree with what she said. But the fact remains, people are endlessly negative about Harry and Meghan in the press.
He was very, very popular. I spent 15 months with him when I wrote his biography. He was fantastic. He was charismatic.
But if you see the response to this discussion this morning, you know that he is still very popular.
Well, I don't think that that's relevant, actually. I think what...
It's not relevant. Okay, I want you to keep that in mind anytime that these royal experts then start bringing up everybody hates Harry and Meghan. Nobody likes them. They have no... Why do we keep talking about them? Nobody cares about them. Nobody cares what they think. Okay, remember that next time that is irrelevant. And to a certain extent, she's right. It is irrelevant how popular Harry and Meghan are as to whether or not this case is true or whether Mirror Group has done anything wrong. But the question that she's actually answering is, why is the media so hell-bent on being negative about Harry and Meghan? And I think that is a very relevant question, and Angela Levin's just kind of trying to dodge it completely.
You just said he used to be popular. He isn't anymore, but he is still very popular with many people.
No, he isn't. His popularity in this country and in America has gone through the floor. And that is because because he's attacking his family. He's taking out all his vengeance on his family, being incredible.
Okay, so he's not taking any revenge out on his family. Everything about how he has presented his family, it's always been through this idea of loving them, of accepting the positive things about them. Like, he wrote a whole book in which he spoke very positively about all of his family members, well, except for maybe Camilla. But he's never painted like his father or William or Kate or anybody else in that family as just like evil, horrible people, right? He loves them. He cares about them. He shares really like warm and cute, touching moments with them. He's not taking this out on his family. He's not seeking revenge on his family. He's just telling the truth. He's just being honest about what happened. And yes, they didn't do very good things. A lot of things that they did were really bad, actually. I swear to God, it's like half the people that listen to these, it's like their kids have like cut them out. And so like they get mad at the entire concept of like kids or other family members like cutting them out of their lives and project that onto the royal family. Harry has a right to say that these actions were wrong and his family was not very supportive of Meghan and him when they were going through all of these issues with the press. That's not taking revenge, just pointing out the obvious there.
Incredibly rude. He's also broken into their privacy. I mean, he talked about William being circumcised, which has got nothing to do with his own health or with his own...
What? Oh, okay. Whoa, okay. He's being incredibly rude. Okay, he didn't say anything rude. This idea of like he broke into their privacy. What the fuck does that mean? Like, he said things that are his experience. And also, like, he didn't randomly just say William was circumcised, right? He didn't just like throw that in the book to embarrass him. It's literally in a paragraph where he's talking about how the media, when they were babies, literal babies, were speculating about him and William's genitals and what they looked like. That wasn't his fault. The media were literally talking about two babies' genitals and also using the story to like paint Diana as like she was like such a woo-woo mom because she didn't want them circumcised and everything. That was the whole point of the story. The point just like completely whooshed over her head. The press shouldn't have given a shit about that because they were minors.
Well, yes. Look, the most recent report about the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, other than what's happening this week, Tom, is that they are reportedly going to stop talking about what's happened in the past. They're not going to criticise the royal family anymore. There are no more tell-all Netflix documentaries, no more memoirs. I think we understood that Meghan might bring out her own, but it won't criticise the royal family. And they're not going to take part in interviews that reveal the inner workings of the royal family. Will that satisfy you?
Not at all.
Okay, well, firstly, this does infuriate me now from Good Morning Britain because, like, bringing up this whole, like, Meghan is gonna have, like, a memoir, which has been, like, floating around in the conspiracy space, but I don't know where they got that. And then she's like, shouldn't that satisfy you? Like, they're gonna, like, stop talking about the royal family then. And he's like, nope. Okay, why are you still mad?
Because I don't believe it for a moment.
Neither do I.
I mean, it's nonsense. They've got nothing else in their lives other than the brand is about knocking the royal family and promoting themselves. They've done a terrible mistake. The brand could have been like the Kardashians or like the Beckhams. It could have been amazingly successful. Instead, it's a brand which is tainted by dishonesty and just...
This is why it's so annoying that they, like, try to, like, care about Harry's mental health or whatever, because it's like, they don't see Harry and Meghan as, like, flesh and blood people. They are literally just talking about the brand. What brand? They just want to do them. This idea of like their whole brand is trashing the royal family. That's definitely not the case. Like, they're doing other things. They're just trying to do things that they think are going to make the world better. They can only see them as this like cardboard cutout of the brand, which is interesting. It's really eye-opening. It's almost like the royal family only thinks about themselves as a brand. It's like classic projection. The royal family is a brand, and they market it and sell it, and they talk about rebranding it all the time because that's all that the royal family is. But I don't get that sense when I like read things or listen to things from Harry and Meghan. I don't get the sense that it's just a brand. Like, I think that there's actual human beings behind it.
Don't you both think there's an irony in that you criticise Harry and Meghan for being negative, for criticising the royal family and making their careers out of it, but you both sit here and you make your names and your careers out of knocking Harry and Meghan?
Right to our head balls years ago. I think that's true at all.
That's not it. I mean,
he is the one who started it.
Yeah.
He is the one by going on to
playground taunts. He started it. He started all of this. Like, literally no evidence how Harry started all of this. He started all of this just by literally existing in the royal family. Just him being born into the royal family started these problems with the media. Just childish.
Oprah Winfrey and saying all those things which with Meghan which were not true.
Wait, okay. That's funny. The inciting incident was not the Oprah interview. The inciting incident was when the royal family did nothing to stop all of the racist reporting with Meghan. This is classic Darvo, by the way, right? Like, deny, attack, reverse victim offender. They're denying that the royal family did anything wrong. They're attacking the Oprah interview as if that was the instigation of like the negativity. Like there wasn't anything previous that caused that interview to happen. And then they're saying that Harry and Meghan are the aggressors and like that they have to defend themselves against Harry and Meghan instead of looking at what was the incident before the Oprah interview that actually started everything, because then you would see who the actual aggressors were in that case, which was all the people in the palace that didn't want to do anything against racism.
And started the ball rolling. He could have gone off to America and produced an amazing brand of goodness and
but
health.
You can't deny it's lucrative for you both.
Well,
it's nothing to do with lucrative.
Oh, they can't deny. They can't deny. That was great. All right, I'm highlighting this video because this is just kind of absolutely delightful. I want to preface this by saying I don't condone a lot of the things that John Cleese has like said in his like wacky old age. He's definitely gone like a little bit cuckoo in some ways, but this interview with him is just super cute. He's like come out in support of like Harry et al. And all of their phone hacking cases because he was also phone hacked once upon a time, and he recognizes how bullshit that was. So like he's not involved in these cases at all, but he's just been like kind of turning up, showing support and being like, yeah, like this sucks. Like I want everyone to like know that this is bad. Let's listen to John Cleese like just sitting outside being like, yeah, don't hack phones.
We've seen plenty of famous faces at tabloid court cases recently. Today, one of Britain's best-known comedians, John Cleese, here as a spectator, not a participant, a past victim of phone hacking by Mirror Group newspapers. He's interested in the case being brought by Prince Harry.
I just want to say John Cleese looks like pretty frail right now. It's a little bit concerning how frail he looks now, but you know, comedy icon. I can't speak too badly about him.
Interested in the case being brought by Prince Harry.
Why have you chosen to come along to the High Court today?
Well, it's a very important trial. This is only the second time in 20 years that there's been a proper hacking trial.
Mirror Group newspapers have admitted and apologised to you for phone hacking. Can you tell me anything about that?
Well, I didn't know much about it because when you're hacked, you don't know. And then a small sum of money, I can't remember, this was some years ago, and a letter arrived, and they admitted what they've been doing. I brought it with me, carefully wrapped up in plastic. There we are.
"Dear Mr. Cleese, I'm writing to apologise for the wholly unacceptable intrusions which you were subjected to by our former journalists."
I think this letter is really interesting that they, like he said, it seemed like they kind of like threw these apologies and these kind of like small sums of money at a lot of the people that they hacked to just kind of like keep them quiet about it. Say, oh, we apologized. Oh, we offered compensation for this. And just kind of like hoped that the big picture would just like slowly melt away. People wouldn't put together the pieces that this was a larger conspiracy. Hopefully just take like the small little crumbs of an apology here, a little bit of money here, and like if they kind of threw enough of those things out there for people to be satisfied. And like John Cleese said, like when you're hacked, you don't know, right? So there wasn't really this sense for him to like seek this like grand justice when it seemed like this minor incident in the way that it was handled. I think he didn't fully understand the scope of what Mirror Group was doing until all of these pieces have kind of started being put together through the inquiries and through these new court cases.
How does it feel to be the victim of that kind of unlawful intrusion?
I think it's a bit like I felt when I was burgled once. There's a sort of sense of intrusion and you feel slightly soiled, slightly violated.
You're known and loved as an actor and a comedian, but
by some people, yes.
Some, by many. Should we now know you as a campaigner for press reform?
I don't really want to be labelled as one thing, which the press tends to do, because I think that most people do several things in their life, you know. But I think this is very important. I think the country's in an awful mess at the moment, and I think we have to start, believe it or not, with regulating the newspapers.
I think that's a really good point. He's saying, like, I'm not saying that I want to be an activist, right? Or that I want to be, like, known specifically for fighting against phone hacking or whatever. But he's saying this is an issue that's important. I think the country's in a mess. I think the press is part of that, is part of the reason why a lot of things are in a mess. So I think it does need reform. He's just saying, I'm not like a reform activist. I like the comment that he made equating phone hacking to like burglary. This idea of a crime in which someone entered into like a private space that you have, or a space that you think is like private and confidential, and removing things from that area, even though you didn't witness it or you didn't know about that, you have no knowledge of it. That sense of like someone being in your space or knowing things that you didn't give them permission to know is just a really icky feeling. And I think that he really articulated that well. That's why we should be so incensed with cases like this, that it's people thinking that they have a right to go wander into people's like private spaces, including like their digital spaces, and take what they want out of them with no repercussions. In the same way that burglary makes us feel icky because we know that somebody was in our personal space, even if they didn't take anything that was super sentimental to us or super valuable to us, that sense that they were in a space that they were not invited into is still like a violation. And it's the same with phone hacking. Even if they didn't take anything super valuable, even if there was no stealing involved, it was still a sense of people's private lives being invaded by somebody that they didn't know had access to that information. Good on you, John Cleese, for like talking sense and all of this.
He's walked into a lion's den. He's a tool of this group of Hugh Grant. Again, this idea that, oh, Harry's just a follower because they still want Harry back if he'll leave Meghan. That he's just misled. He's just a child, an angry child. And he's walked into a lion's den without realising the great dangers he's put himself into. Right, the great dangers he's put himself into, it shouldn't be. Like, that's a confession in itself. It shouldn't be a great danger to stand up in court and have your time to speak and try and get some justice, right? That is admitting that these are dangerous enemies to have and that the papers will rip him apart, right? And the fact that's admitted and everyone just goes along with that makes me sick. Because, yeah, he is putting himself into great danger by doing this, but that's not something to, like, further beat him with, is it? We should be saying, like, wow, how brave. How incredibly brave that someone would do that, right? That someone would take that stand, because a lot of people have thought, no, it's not for me, it's not for my career, I can't take it. And I don't blame those people, because it's so unique to different people's situations, you know. Some people, for example, will have a lot of anxiety and stress, and the idea of going through that might really negatively impact their mental health to the point they can't cope. You know, and unfortunately that is what the tabloids count on, right? They make it completely unlivable. And that's what happens in abuse systems. They make it so unlivable that a person just thinks, I can't go through it, I can't deal with it. So some people have taken the payoff, and I don't want to judge that, because I understand it is scary, it's terrifying, you know. But Harry's someone who said, you know what, I'll do it. I'll be the shield, and I will go forward and I'll do that.
So the allegation here from a former BBC royal correspondent is lending weight to Prince Harry's allegations of a poisonous relationship between the royal family and tabloids based on planting stories. Now, she also notes in that interview that King Charles fought against Harry's court case, calling it a suicide mission, and indeed Harry said he was summoned to Buckingham Palace in order to drop the case because of the effect it would have on the royal family. Some might allege also the relationship between the royal family and the tabloid press that he was seeking to expose. But let's just circle back to what he said. Democracy fails when your press fails to scrutinise and hold the government accountable, and instead chooses to get into bed with them so they can ensure the status quo. Well, yes, quite. I mean, I think it's quite striking how we've taken it as some sort of fact of life, like the weather, that newspapers are simply playthings of wealthy, rich individuals who are there to use their control over the means of information to help protect a status quo which they don't just profit from, but they are instrumental to. And that's the nature of the British press. They don't exist to inform and educate in a rational, healthy, functioning democracy, which we don't have anything even close to approaching one. You would have newspapers which would seek to educate people clearly, factually, about the world around them, so people can make educated guesses about what happens next in the society, or their local communities for that matter. That is democracy. But that's not what happens, because the actual reality of the world is filtered through newspapers who have very clear, self-evident agendas.
One victim of phone hacking blamed a family member, blamed a sister for a really intimate story getting into the newspapers because her sister was the only person that she'd told. And it never crossed her mind that exchanges on voicemail between her and her sister had been listened to by investigators working for newspapers or by newspaper journalists. Just have a think about that for a minute. Your sister is the only person that knows you are, let's say, pregnant. Right? The only person you've told is your sister. And it turns up in a newspaper the next day. So what do you do? Who do you blame? She's the only person you've told. So you check. I mean, did you tell anyone? No, I promise, I swear, of course I didn't tell anyone. You must have told someone. How's it got into the paper? Think about the damage that could do to a relationship. And now, particularly if you're someone who spends a lot of time on social media attacking Prince Harry and his wife, now just think about the possibility, or the allegation, not even the fact, just the possibility that he has spent his entire life at constant risk of that sort of betrayal of trust.
Like I said before, I'm not a legal expert or a lawyer or anything. So what I say in terms of like legal analysis of the case or the procedure is frankly worthless. I wish other media commentators would come to the same realization. But what I can say is that I hope Prince Harry and others prosecuting these cases get justice. Like I've talked about in many other instances on this channel, the things alleged in these cases are morally wrong and I think violate a right to privacy and freedom that everyone should have. I really hope the legal consequences from these cases are severe enough as to be a deterrent against this type of media intrusion into people's lives. These types of legal decisions have ripple effects throughout the UK legal system, as they can set precedents that entrench unfair systems. But not only that, it creates a cultural acceptance of this type of stalking as journalism that can permeate into all different types of English news media throughout the globe, as we saw with the paparazzi incident. It's clear from the media spin that there was a narrative of acceptance of this type of behavior for the sake of journalism or perhaps making a living or public interest. And I want to see all of that change. I also wish the media would really highlight that this is not just a quote royal issue or a celebrity issue. Now that the internet is a thing, and there's such a thing as viral celebrity, more and more people have some type of public-facing online persona. And whether that is actively curated, like a blogger or an influencer, or some random chatty lady like me, or is created outside of the person's control, such as a Twitter villain of the week, or a funny video clip that becomes a meme, it means more people have the possibility of gaining some level of public recognition and being thrust into a media spotlight. But with that public recognition also attracts, of course, bad actors. I highly recommend John Ronson's book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, which kind of takes a look at this idea of like micro celebrity that comes from this type of like online public shaming and the harm that it can cause. I also like ContraPoint's canceling video, obviously. But the point is, more and more people who are considered not famous can become the targets of hate campaigns, harassment, stalking, threats, doxing, etc. So if there is nothing stopping news outlets from using these kind of tactics to gather information for their reports, what's to stop that from happening to anyone? What will stop any influencer, content creator, or hapless meme person from being told that there's nothing that can be done about illegal actions taken against them to gather intelligence? Because they're quote-unquote public figures. They are of public interest or of interest to the public. The consequences of such a ruling that said that this was okay would be dire. So I'm really wishing the best on all of these legal cases, that they end up with something that is fair and an active deterrent against this type of shitty, horrible reporting. All right, that's all I have time for, okay? Bye. I will see you guys hopefully eventually. I don't know what my schedule is going to be, but like, it's coming. Stuff's coming. Thank you for joining us today. Bye for me. I'll see you at some point. I'll see you when I see you. All right, bye. Bye-bye.